Right, so we're back in the home studio, and
Brian Pacino, Nick De Niro,
Yes.
method acting on the camera.
yeah. So we're going to have a bit of humour to start with, because I think we're going to get a bit dark actually, and focused around this ongoing recession-depression. Commentators in the US have been calling it depression. Wall Street's bubbling away.
I called it a reacquaintance with your posterior.
Yeah.
Basically, we're all going to be on a flat of our asses, and we're going to get very down, dirty and comfortable with those things, and we're going to rediscover how life really is before we invented all this wonderful stuff we play around with today.
Well, it's sort of like, you know, we're in a situation where we're still experiencing in some ways the best of the best and the worst of the worst. But if Nick and I are right, I think the situation's about to take a turn for the worse. And we don't have any brilliant answers to this problem, because, you know, we really need to share our understanding, and we need people to come up with creative solutions, in particular living with less, because I think that's what it's going to be all about. We're all
totally agree.
going to live with less, and the people who are actually taking more than their share at the moment, well, I think a day of reckoning's coming. And of course, the day of reckoning comes for us all anyway, because you can't take this to the grave with you. Whatever you steal off people now, you can guarantee will be robbed off you at some stage in the future.
Yeah.
So that's probably a good way to start. I still want to go back to the fundamental human rights of the right to a job, the right to food, clothing and shelter. And I think also, you know, the right to live in a society where you can have a degree of justice. If it's an unjust and unfair society, then I think there's every grounds for discontent, and for you to be, you know, looking for some way of overturning the order that is being imposed on you. And I guess that's what's happening really. We're all having a kind of new order imposed on us, and I don't think we've actually voted to have it.
Yeah, and I think Brian's touched on a very, very important point, which is the order we have imposed upon us at the moment has been imposed upon us by what I describe as a fully privatised, corporatised world, where the public domain has been seized, where the polity has been preempted, where we are encouraged to not actually partake, we merely have a facade. One of the great cries of, you know, since I was at school was bigger is better. Bigger is always better. So the bigger company, the bigger politics, you know, political body. And a good example, Brian's in local politics. When I first went down to have a look at a local body to actually get some work done, this is going back in the 70s, I was in Christchurch, and I think at the time there were 15 different, within the greater Christchurch boundaries, 15 different, you know, councils, which are all now one, the Christchurch City Council. But the thing is, things worked on a local scale, and those councils had local people voted onto them. They had multiple local boards, and the fragmentation of it kept it out of the hands of, you know, it formed a check and a balance against an overarching seizure of their powers, or when we talk about powers, we never ever talk about the responsibilities. But it meant that the responsibilities were local.
This is actually a really good point you're making, Nick, because we're now focusing on what happens to people in their local communities.
Yeah.
And the lines of accountability that Nick's been talking about with smaller local government is about to be lost. I can feel a movement towards a unitary authority in Wellington, and for some reason people are buying into this whole idea that if we make things bigger, there'll be scales of efficiency and so forth. And in actual fact, I'm sure Nick's aware of, and
I'm very aware. Look,
of
I
how
work in business,
yeah,
and what happens as you work into large corporations is you actually find that there is a degree of padding. They're supposed to be bigger and more efficient. The smaller the business, you'll find the closer the person is to the bottom line. And that means the more efficient they have to be, there is no padding. Small business can be very efficient. Big business is naturally wasteful. The same applies to bureaucracies of any size. And what we actually have to do is look at what we want out of them. At the moment, they've merely become leeches. I really don't see it any other way.
Well, E.F. Schumacher wrote a book called Small is Beautiful, and I've never forgotten, had a big impact on me. And actually, he talked about how, you know, the big creatures, the dinosaurs, died out and replaced by smaller, more efficient units. And unfortunately, you're right about, Nick, when you say the justifications for these bigger organisations. Basically what's going to happen is people will use this as leverage for higher wages and income at the top. So, you know, you get a chief executive that goes from a few $100,000 a year to $500,000 to $1 million.
And of course that creates a sort of slipstream vacuum behind them, so that he needs an assistant who probably does, little more than go for a coffee with him in the morning, and he's got to be worth at least 2/3 of that pay. And he too will have his sort of fleas on his back. He'll earn a sort of slightly less, and before you know it, our public bill for wages is blown out, and we're all sitting there paying for it, but we're not getting anything more for it.
So the economy is in a slide, and the only growth industry is the expansion of government and local government under the rhetoric that they're doing it more efficiently. So
rather bizarre.
Look, guys, we're making an appeal to kinds of things that are probably happening all around the world, that when economic hardship takes place, these people will find ways to deal with the situation, and I'm afraid it's not really in the public interest, but you're told that it is.
Okay, I'd like to jump it onto a step here. The step which Brian hasn't mentioned, he's talked within the paradigms of our current polity. I believe that our current polities are failing us very badly. And in New Zealand here, we've got a Labour Party who isn't a Labour Party in the traditional sense. And they've managed to allow themselves to be captured by a particular clique who are more interested in remaining within that, if even in opposition, they're more interested in remaining in the current paradigm and a lack of recognition that the world has changed. So consequently, they've become like the dinosaurs. They haven't recognised that the planet's drying out, and there's no longer any more dinosaur grass for them to eat. So they're doomed to extinction, and the implication for that from, and to people like you and me and Brian, is that our current structures have failed, but we need to replace them with something which is appropriate. The question I have constantly asked is, can we replace them or basically evolve them to what we need to do? Or are they caught in a paradigm from which there's no escape? And I'm coming very rapidly to the conclusion that in a local sense we will merely take their legitimacy from them and develop something else. Well,
this gets back to what I was talking about in an earlier video. Nick, my friend Ted Howard, he talks about, we had a very serious conversation when I saw him in Nelson over in the early new year, and Ted kind of sharpened me up a bit by saying, well, Brian, it's not really about, we've overshot our carrying capacity as a planet, it's not really about peak oil, it's not about the financial crisis, it's really just about a culture that is insane. We've become unhinged. And so on that basis, I guess if that is the case, every scenario, every alternative we come up with is going to actually take us in the final analysis down the same path that we're in now, into a black hole. And you know, we don't want that. We're looking for a light, if you like, in this situation. And
what you're looking for, Brian, is how we actually descend the other side of a mountain without breaking our legs and hitting our head on the ground at the same time.
And I think it's coming down to that, actually. So this is a sort of a gloomy...
Well, it's not, but I'm going to put a bit of light on it as a final flourish. I'm a person who has spent my life catching trout, which is probably not very nice if you like fish. But I happen to admire the trout as one of the most magnificent creatures, and I was over at the Ruamahanga River the other day, and I was up to my waist in water, and I was going upstream along the willows. And there were fish in front of me. I was keeping them behind so they couldn't see me, and I was picking off one or two of them with my fly fishing gear. And it occurred to me that when I was young, I was given a copy of the complete angler, Isaac Walton. He wrote it in about 1600 or thereabouts, and he described what I was actually doing in his book, the exact technique of what I was doing. Now I had on, in terms of in my hand, the latest graphite technology and plastics and nylons and whatever else. And I thought about it, and I thought, now how the hell did Isaac do this? What was he using? And I thought as I came out of the water, I thought, well, I really don't know. But you know what? He was doing it, so there is hope. We can still do stuff. So, where else can you be?
There you are. That's the end of this one. And I'm on my existential tightrope tonight, so I got to just get to the camera and shut it down, and we'll put this up on YouTube.
Admirable, Brian. Righto. See you guys.